Strange New World Season 3 has wrapped and the finale delivers shocking twists, big callbacks, and one moment that could change everything for Pike and Batel. Let's dive into the highs, the lows, and the surprises you didn't see coming. Well, hey everyone, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, Strange New World Season 3 has come to an end, and today we're talking about the season finale, Episode 10, New Life and New Civilizations. We're going to run through it all, talk about what I liked, what I didn't like as much, things we maybe expected to see and things we didn't get. It's been a bit of a roller coaster of a season with quite a diverse array of episode styles, but I think overall this season finale was a generally satisfying one and a generally enjoyable one. The episode begins with a log from Pike talking about Batel starting her new job as the head of JAG. Marie is back on the Enterprise after an exhausting first week on the job, and they've got a bit of a dinner party at Pike's to celebrate. I love the fact that we had a mirror image scene in this episode which mirrored episode 2 of season 1, where we had Uhura rocking up to the first time at one of Pike's dinner parties in her dress uniform. We get a similar scene in this episode, which is Scotty arriving in his dress uniform, just like Uhura did back in season 1, and he isn't too impressed that people didn't fill him in properly on the routine of the evening. I would have liked probably this scene even more so if Uhura had have been the one to give him the false info, because it was pranked on her in season 1. So I think if she had have done the pranking on Scotty and passed it along down the line, I think that would have made the scene even better. She's getting her revenge, I suppose, on having it done to her. But it was a fun scene nonetheless. I also loved in this scene that Pelia references a time-travelling doctor she once knew. Well, does this mean that Pelia was once a Doctor Who companion? We already had one reference to Doctor Who before this season in episode 6, when we saw inside the Scavengers ship, we saw a TARDIS inside that. So there's already been one confirmation that maybe Doctor Who exists within the Star Trek universe. And Pelia makes a comment here that you could take as being the same reference. So that's a very interesting reference from her, just marrying up the various different franchises of Doctor Who and Star Trek again to say, hey, we might be looking at a crossover sometime in the future. Spock references the word Kali Chashna, which was something we heard back in episode 5 with the through the Lens of Time episode, talking about those VZDA phrases and so forth. And Marie is visibly rattled. It turns out that Corby is on another planet that has a significant VZDA history, apart from Vardia 9, which we visited in episode 5, and that the occupants of this planet also worshipped the VZDA as well. After doing a diagnostic in sickbay, Scotty and Benga and Chapel realise there's an anomaly in the logs, and it turns out that the VZDA entity that had previously possessed Ensign Gamble has in fact escaped. And we soon find out that Corby, whilst being shown around by a high cleric on this planet Sky Gowan that he happens to be on, that Ensign Gamble, or the VZDA inhabiting Ensign Gamble's corporeal form, has in fact escaped the Enterprise and from the pattern buffer, and is now on this planet Sky Gowan, and is basically taking up a position as like a spiritual leader to the masses who worship them like gods. It would appear that Corby has activated his emergency transponder and the Enterprise crew needs to mount a rescue mission. This episode connects quite heavily to episode 5, the Through the Lens of Time episode, where we get a return to references to Marie's enhanced strength and abilities after the Gorn/Illyrian DNA infusion, and she feels definitely drawn to stop the VZDA. This is a continuation of what we already got set up in episode 5, with her having that fight with Gamble back in sickbay and having a distinct alien influence within her genetic makeup. And here we get quite a nice moment here between Pike and Batel. You definitely feel like this episode is heading in a direction where you feel at the core of you that time is not on the side of the Pike-Batel relationship. Something is going to go down that is going to see the end of this relationship. in some way, shape or form, by the time we get to the end, you'd feel like it's definitely heading somewhere where everything isn't necessarily gonna end with rainbows and sunsets for Chris and Marie. On this alien planet of Sky Gowan, which is this other VZDA worshipping planet, the away team has to beam down as local traders to blend in. And it also seems like not only has Latta been teaching Spock ballroom dancing, but it seems like Spock's been giving a few classes to Latta in the form of Vulcan nerve pinch tutorials. And Latta takes out a couple of guards guarding the entrance to the temple on this planet in order to get to the next level. It's cool that we had that moment, I think, between Chapel and Latta where Chapel says, oh, like, hang on, how did you learn to do the Vulcan nerve pinch? Like, Spock tried to teach it to me and I couldn't quite get it. I couldn't get the pressure right or the thumb placement right or something. So I love the fact that because Latta is security focused and does a lot of hand-to-hand training and all that stuff, she was able to get the hang of it a lot quicker and easier than Chapel was. So I love that little reference in there. After the away team enters the temple, we find out that talking with Sam Kirk, that it appears that the VZDA used galactic ley lines to traverse the galaxy between Vardia 9 and Sky Gowan, and that had this big teleportation network, almost a bit like Stargate. It seemed like it was a bit Stargate-like, having different portals on different planets, and they could go through one door and end up on another planet. It felt very Stargate to me. But it seems obvious that the VZDA, in the form of Gamble, has travelled to Sky Gowan to potentially try to release all of his trapped VZDA brethren from the prison on Vardia 9 into the Sky Gowan population to basically possess all of the locals there. The locals have all taken to Gamble as a god and as a form of praise to him. They're all stabbing themselves in the eyes with knives and other pointy implements, which is a bit full on. I think we saw Gamble getting his eyes blown out in episode 5, but now we've got all of the locals all stabbing themselves in the eye as a form of praise or worship to the VZDA. So yeah, the VZDA are pretty full on. And it would appear that the mission is so important that there's a communique with Kirk and the Farragut is joining to help. I did find it a little bit odd that all of these communiques were all done exclusively with Kirk. I think it would have been nice to see the Vulcan captain of the Farragut. The poor old female Vulcan of the Farragut gets very, very little appearances and very little love. It's always the Kirk show when it comes to the Farragut. The captain is a bit of an afterthought. And I think if they were coordinating rescue efforts and everything, and they were coordinating plans of attack between the Farragut and the Enterprise, surely Pike should be talking to the Vulcan Farragut captain, not doing all of his liaison through Kirk. In further examination of the various different glyphs and inscriptions and so forth on the VZDA tablets and so forth on this planet, we soon realise that Mbenga's life story of a situation when he was a 12-year-old and had to kill somebody in self-defense, that it was specifically about him. Now, this is another one of these situations where we get little hints and references where, as they said back in episode 5, effect precedes cause, where things are almost like prophesized to happen before they've happened. They introduced this concept of effect preceding cause back in episode 5, so it's good that they're maintaining that narrative thread through this episode. It appears that Gamble needs a second person to enter the portal, and he pushes Mbenga through whilst stunning the others. They're now back through the portal there onto Vardia 9, where Gamble's mission is to release all of his VZDA brothers and sisters on the unsuspecting planetary population of Sky Gowan. Gamble blasts the statue there in the temple, and we see Marie's head suddenly glow. Now this was back to my observation in the promo photos, where we got to see this statue in a medical scan in the background of a promo photo, which I was correct. That there is a definite connection between the statue on Vardia 9 and Marie Batel, which all links into her connection that we saw between the VZDA back in episode 5. In sickbay, Marie's eyes are glowing. She's apparently become the Beholder statue from Vardia 9. I thought with the glowing eyes and everything here, this might have connected somehow to Gary Mitchell with the glowing silver eyes from the TOS episode. I wonder whether they were maybe going to connect it somehow to that, but gets a whole different kettle of fish. And Benga realizes that Gamble needs him to get out of the statue, and he realizes if he kills himself, that Gamble will be stuck there. So he threatens to kill himself and is able to trap Gamble in another area of the temple. Next on the Enterprise, we realise that Marie has become this combination of all the races that fought the VZDA in the past, whether she's got a bit of Gorn and a bit of Illyrian and a bit human and a bit of all these other little snippets of other races that have had dealings with the VZDA in the past. And somehow that makes her some super warrior to fight the VZDA. This I found it was a little bit of a stretch. It was just I'm not sure whether it was the way they explained it, but it was the fact that she had somehow become some superhuman VZDA fighting warrior because she's got a little bit of multiple races inside her. How this all activated and became a thing for her, I went along with it, but it was, hang on, how are you suddenly like this? Is this just have suddenly become this or become aware of this? Or it was a little bit muddled, I thought, the way this was explained as to how she became the Beholder statue. And they explain it, well, okay, well, the Beholder statue's there to guard against the VZDA, and for some reason she's got all of the traits or something for this thing, and then linking that back to the whole effect preceding cause business and everything. It was like, okay, like I get it, but I found it just a little bit of a stretch. Just the logic behind it all piecing together. And Marie basically realises that she has to be the one to defeat Gamble and the VZDA because it was always her destiny to do so. So they need to get Pike and Batel into the portal to fight Gamble, and without the right code like they had with Gamble plus Mbenga, they have to use a massive power source to unlock the door to get in. And this is where we get the Enterprise syncing up with the Farragut to open the gateway, facilitated with a mind meld between Spock and Kirk to enable this to happen. This is not where I thought this episode was going to go. When I heard about this, the pilots had to be in sync. My first thought was, okay, it has to be Ortegas because she's the best pilot on the ship. I thought what it was going to be was they needed two kick-ass helmsmen to facilitate this maneuver. So I thought, yes, Spock was going to do a mind meld, but on the basis that in the past 2 seasons we've had a legacy character introduction in the final episode of the season, having Kirk in the last episode introduced in end of season 1, and then having Scotty introduced in the last episode of season 2. I thought the direction that this episode was going to head was that Kirk was going to say, oh, we've got a really cool helmsman on the Farragut who's kick-ass, and his name's Sulu, and Spock is going to have to do a mind meld to connect the minds of both Sulu and Ortegas to pull off this maneuver. I thought that was the direction they were going to head down, just because we've had a legacy character intro at the last episode of each previous season, so I thought that was where we were headed, as opposed to having Spock and Kirk mind melded up to perform this perfectly in sync maneuver to open the door for Batel and Pike to pass through. That being said, I did like the mind meld thing. I love the fact that this mind meld brought Spock and Kirk closer together. It gave them that extra connection. Kirk says to Spock, call me Jim, and don't judge him on the Orion incident and so forth. So I love the fact that the bond is getting closer between Kirk and Spock. I love the fact that we've got a little bit of personal history shared there through a mind meld, and these guys are getting a bit more to know each other, which I think is great. The ship's in perfect synchronization, fire the phasers and open the gateway. I felt like this maybe should have been like a main deflector dish routine rather than a phaser array routine, because I felt like if they wanted to destroy the portal, you use your phasers, but if they want to just pump a bunch of energy into them to open them up, I thought maybe that should have been a main deflector dish scenario. The fact that you got 2 starships as well, beaming their phasers right into the back of this doorway, and Pike and Batel are literally standing like about 3 meters away from the doorway. It's like, what is stopping them not only at the very least being irradiated by cancer by this huge double phaser beam that's going on literally meters away from them, if not melting them entirely? It felt like we've got 2 massive beams there hitting the back of this door, and Batel and Pike are literally just standing on the other side of it, just going, oh yeah, we'll just open the door for us. That seemed that they should have been a little bit further away from the door or taken cover or something when that was going on. That seemed a little bit implausible. particularly as well that you've got phaser beams coming from starships that are incredibly powerful, and to have that level of pinpoint accuracy to hit a target as small as a doorway also seemed quite a huge undertaking. But they open the doorway and Pike and Batel go through. Now they're on Vardia 9. A Gamble breaks through and attacks Pike and Marie. Marie's hands start glowing as if she's about to start throwing laser beams and whatnot at Gamble. So I'm glad in a way that we didn't just get a typical been there, done that before fight between Gamble and Batel where they're just hurling energy beams at one another with their hands and doing like a Voldemort versus Harry Potter like wand fight thing with sparks and whatnot happening in the middle. I think that would have been the easy, most obvious route to go down with these two fightings. But I did like the fact that we basically got this whole dream sequence between Batel and Pike in terms of it being this life never lived scenario. I felt like we got this moment in this episode which in one sense I really loved, and in the other sense I thought it could have been told more effectively. Just to put it in perspective, we had Pike and Batel having their anniversary in a house. They're engaged to be married. It's this dream moment, which is like a flash forward to the future. This recurring theme of the knock at the door. They've got a dog. Now they've got a daughter. Now Pike's a fleet captain, and then he's going to go off to training cadets. He dreads of the accident happening that puts him in the wheelchair. Further knocks at the door. We've got Chris coming home. There being a further time jump where the accident didn't happen. There was no radiation, no explosion. He didn't end up in a wheelchair. And now we've got, again, this timeline change where it flashes forward again, and they're older. Their daughter is now adult and she's dating Admiral April's son, and they're engaged to be married. And then there's another knock at the door and there's a photo wall showcasing their life and everything. We time jump again, and Chris and Marie are very old. They're very elderly now. We get this recurring shot of this shooting star living their life in memories. It was like The Inner Light, where Picard lived that whole lifetime in that 20-minute period where the probe was attached to him, and he got to live that entire life on the planet. I felt it was a bit like that, but I also did think it was also a little bit like, say, the end of La La Land, when they're in the jazz club and Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling look at each other from across the room, and in the matter of a few fleeting moments, they have this joint imagining of what their life could have been like if they'd stayed together as a couple. And I thought this was done so much better in La La Land in terms of just this very quick, rapid fire images of life and what they got up to and everything. And it was a very, very short sequence, but it told so much and was so emotionally resonating in La La Land. But just to put it in perspective, the sequence in that film went for about 6 minutes, whereas the sequence in this last episode of Strange New Worlds went for almost double that in time. And I did enjoy it at the end of this episode, seeing this life that could have been lived between Pike and Batel, this imaginary life that they shared together with having kids and being married and all that stuff. I thought that was good, but by the time I was halfway through it, I thought, oh, Jesus, this bloody sequence is going on a little bit long. And then I thought of La La Land, and I thought how well it was done at the end of La La Land and told so emotionally satisfyingly, but done in about half as much time. And I thought, well, geez, they could have done it more like that, and it would have the same amount of emotional resonance. But I found by the time I got halfway through this constant flash forward to the future, flash forward to the future. Now they got a dog. Now they got a daughter. Now the daughter's grown up. Now they're old. Now it's like by the time we got to the end of it, I just thought, oh, I get the point. We're seeing a life that could have been lived. So I'm glad that we got that story told, where you got to see Chris and Marie together for life. That was good. I just think it was a bit drawn out, and when you compare it to similar sequences like in La La Land, didn't overstay its welcome. We get a final showdown between Gamble and Batel. He releases the VZDA, but she traps them all in the temple, and she becomes the statue. Chapel and Corby say their goodbyes, and he gives her a star chart of different areas of the galaxy that have yet to be discovered and investigated. Kirk and Spock play some chess Latta arrives and Sam joins Jim for a drink. Pike and Una share a bourbon, and Chris is sad because Marie sacrificed herself to defeat the VZDA, and he's never going to see her again. And I love the voiceover we get here with Pike voiceover on relationships, where we see Pelia and Scotty, and Chaplin and Benga, Una and Ortegas and Uhura, Laan and Spock. It's solidifying and ratifying these relationships with all our crew. And we get a nice little final scene on the bridge where they head off to investigate all these new planets that Corby has given them a star map for. And I love the fact that Pike saw a shooting star there, as if it's Marie pointing the way to where they should go. So that was a cute little wink to what they'd witnessed within that dream sequence. And the Enterprise goes off to warp at the end. So yeah, look, I think this was a satisfying episode to conclude on. We got a conclusion of the whole VZDA arc. We got a conclusion of Batel's situation and an ending of that story. I think that was quite satisfying. I did enjoy the flash forward moments to revealing the life not lived between Pike and Batel. That was good, just went on a bit too long. I think that could have been made briefer. But overall, I think it was generally a satisfying season finale. As I said, no legacy character introduction at the end of the season. I think I was maybe expecting for Sulu to pop up or something. That didn't happen, but I'm guessing that's probably going to happen sometime early or midway through season 4. But hopefully that doesn't, in order for that to happen, doesn't mean that we're going to be getting rid of Ortegas quite so soon, because she's such a great character. Hopefully we see Sulu join the Enterprise in the blue science uniform, which I think we first saw him in the first couple of episodes that were shot for original series. He was wearing blue, not yellow, and I think he was more of a science officer or something. So I think maybe it would be good to bring him in that capacity, maybe doing some work with Sam Kirk perhaps. I think might be good, so we don't get to kick Ortegas out the door just quite so soon. But generally speaking, I think this was a solid season finale for Strange New Worlds Season 3. But let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comments section and we'll get chatting about that. Be sure to subscribe to Sci-Finatics if you haven't done so already. Click on subscribe and ring the bell and everything to stay current and up to date with all my latest Star Trek related YouTube videos. Also be sure to check out the merch in the merch store. Plenty of cool t-shirts, hoodies, caps, mugs, stickers, tons of stuff there. Lots of Star Trek stuff, lots of sci-fi stuff there, and always at very discounted prices. And it really helps support the channel as well. Guys, I'll be back on the weekend. We've got the live stream going on. Make sure you come along and be part of the live show with myself and David and our guests. We'll chat about the last 3 episodes of Strange New Worlds and what we thought of the season as a whole. Be sure to be there for that. I'll see you soon.